Well, this voice debate is not getting any kinder or any wiser, is it? Just a shocker. Makes me worry about the future of this country. I mean, if you doubt how nasty this campaign is, just think about how it's managed to have people turn publicly against John Farnham, the man known as Australia's voice, loved by all, I would have thought, a bloke who's allowed his anthem to be used by the Yes campaign simply because he thought it might help unite the nation. Well, for his trouble, John Farnham has now been turned on by angry no supporters on social media. Glad your career is nearly over. You've sold your soul to a race-dividing campaign, said one post. Shame, shame, says another, saying Farnham hasn't read the full Uluru statement. Oh, God, there we go with that nonsense again. And accusing Farnham of doing this to try and get as much money as he can. Another says Farnham's been co-opted by bad actors for nefarious purposes, and it disgusts him. And these critics also invoke apartheid, incredibly, and accuse Farnham of supporting apartheid. While yet another talks about racist white people and pushing Marxism, and describing Farnham as POS. Well, we know what that stands for. This is just sickening, isn't it? Although not surprising to any of us involved in this debate, abuse is common. But it's especially sad in this case, given this much-loved and iconic Australian has spent the past year battling serious cancer. And all Farnham did was offer up his song.
John is not on social media. Hopefully he won't see a lot of the really nasty stuff that is out there. I think it would be very confronting for him, actually, because he's never had bad publicity. He's never had people being angry with him.
This reaction, of course, shows the ugliness behind much of the voice debate, how it's less about detail and constitutional provisions and seemingly more about division, partisanship and ugly resentment. It's very sad. Still, the no case has been buoyed by today's news poll. The no vote now has a majority across the country. 2 points I want to make on that. First, the polling started early last week, so it won't have picked up any change from once the date was announced and the campaigning began in earnest. But second, of course, the yes case is starting from way behind now. The trend in the polls has been evident for months. And now, with less than 6 weeks to go till polling day, the task looks formidable, to say the least. So it's high time we saw a proper debate, right? The campaign has been pretty low-key until now. Remember, the Coalition did a lot of work on a voice when it was in power. I was part of that, serving voluntarily on a working group. And despite the theatrics, there's very little between the major parties. Both support constitutional recognition. Both support legislating a voice. The only difference is the Coalition reject a voice being mandated in the Constitution. Despite that solitary point of disagreement, once the Coalition decided to back the no case, it made the referendum task extremely difficult. And it also ensured this was going to get testy because it pits the major parties and their leaders against each other for supremacy. In this titanic struggle, the government has made one major mistake. I'll come back to that in just a moment. Because the scare campaign from the no camp has been pretty wild and relentless. All sorts of furphies about reparations and treaties and the like. They've even pretended the 439-word Uluru statement is really 26 pages or 18 pages or now 15 pages in order to bolster their scare. They're still going on with that nonsense based on the same erroneous claim from the same player, Megan Davis, over and over again. Now, none of this changes the fact of what the statement is. It's such a tricky distraction, pretending the government has secretly signed up to all these extra pages, something sinister. And never mind that the voice can't impose any of these things anyway, because it's only advisory. In fact, some no advocates pretend it's not advisory, that it will actually hold sway or have power. Now, that's totally untrue. We know the detailed wording. It's only an advisory body, that is all. The voice cannot impose anything on anyone. So with the scares still coming thick and fast, this is where Labor's mistake has made their argument so vulnerable. They've failed to provide enough detail about the shape of the voice. Now, I've been saying this for a year or more. Sure, we've got the most important detail, the constitutional wording. That's the only change we're voting on. Anything else about the voice can be changed anytime by Parliament. But Anthony Albanese and his government need to give voters more of an idea about what the voice would look like, how grassroots representatives would be chosen, where and when they would meet, how long they would serve, some of those nuts and bolts issues. Sure, they don't want to get down in details, but voters want to get an idea of the shape of the voice. All that work has been done by the coalition. Labor should go largely with the coalition recommendations. How could the coalition criticise that? And besides, that would help expose the hypocrisy of the coalition, calling a voice divisive when they're proposing to legislate the same sort of thing. Anyway, unless the yes side does this, it's very hard for them to hit back at the scares. It's nuts to be on the back foot constantly telling people that what the voice is not, while they fail to tell people more about what it is. Still, it must be said the coalition, of course, is promising to legislate a voice, and they haven't given us the details on that either. And now they're saying that if they defeat this referendum, they'll give us another referendum just on constitutional recognition. Now, I'm old enough to remember when this whole process started, nearly 20 years ago, when we decided to work out how best to deliver Indigenous recognition. The voice turned out to be the answer to that question. So if we reject this referendum, we'll go right back to the future next time there's a coalition government. What a mess.